you a quick introduction about him. So Love Zohar is a seasoned governance, risk and compliance professional and certified ISO lead implementer with over a decade of experience in cybersecurity and information security training. As the founder of CyberGRC, he has delivered 10,000 plus hours of training to 20,000 plus professionals across 15 plus countries, empowering global teams to implement and audit ISO 27001, ISO 22301, ISO 27701, and ISO 42001 framework. Love's practical hands-on teaching style bridges technical depth with real-world application, making complex GRC concept simple and actionable. He holds multiple certification including ISO 27001 and 42001 lead implementer, CompTIA Security Plus, ITIL V4, CCNA, and Prince 2 practitioner.
Good morning and welcome back to Gupshup. Today's conversation is not about definitions, it's about the reality. We are talking about what actually happens when organizations try to implement control under ISO 27002. On paper, everything looks perfect, but in practice, that's where the struggle begins. So, today, let's break down the real implementation challenges professionals face and what interviewers actually expect you to understand. So, when implementing ISO 27002 controls, how do you ensure that controls are not just documented for compliance but actually embedded into operational process?
Well, to start the day, let me greet to all my viewers. Good morning, everyone. Well, Aditi, again, it's a very good question to start with, right?
Yes, sir.
Basically, this question talks all about how we implement the control and how we make sure this is part of your day-to-day operations, right? So basically, all the interview questions makes or it demands you to understand the question first before even you start answering that. And once you understand, you have to compose the answers, using the right keywords. So adding to this question, now this question checks if the candidate understand real implementation, right? Not just writing the policy or procedure. So one should think about linking controls to daily process and assigning a responsibility. So when we have any policies or any controls implemented, it has to be aligned to the process as well. Similarly, there should be a owner or a responsible person or a department who owns the control responsibility. See, basically, these controls becomes effective only when they are part of our daily routines or when they are part of the process, right? Or else it is of no effective. It will be there on the documentation part only, right? So adding to that, let me take one simple example. Like we all know about backup policies, which we come across in your day-to-day life, right? See now, when instead of having only document policy on the documentation part, right, we should schedule it automatic daily backup procedure and make sure we assign an IT team to review this backup, right? And this has to be like reviewed once in a week, bare minimum, and it has to be reported to the management also. That is how we can make sure that whatever the controls we have implemented, it is not just on the document, it is part of our daily practice also on the floor, right? Hope that answered your question, Aditi.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anything from you, love, sir?
So basically, Jen described it very well. You start not with directly creating the policy. What you
Yeah.
do, you start by identifying, first of all, what all processes are there. For example, mapping control to a live business process like HR onboarding, background verification, vendor onboarding, third party onboarding, where you have third party related controls. Then you have change management for better managing the changes in the organization. Then you have incident handling. All these are, first of all, processes. Okay. Now, in these processes, you can actually add controls to make them more robust from a information security perspective. Okay, that should be the idea. Okay, so there are
Yeah.
two different roles here that we need to understand. There is one person called as a control owner who is accountable for implementation of the control and making sure that the control is effective or not. However, there is one more role here which is called as a process owner. Now, this owner is not responsible for the control. This process owner is responsible for making sure that the process goes smoothly after implementation of that control. Okay. So, for example, if you have background verification, BGV itself is a control, right? And it's a process also where you are doing a background check for the onboarding employees, right?
Yeah.
But is it working correctly or not? That is one question. How will you measure the effectiveness of this control? That's another question. You can do internal audit. You can do some sort of a monitoring on that. But this has to be done at a periodic level, just to make sure that this control is working fine or not. Okay, only then, after doing all these checks, you can say that these controls are actually working and operational and not only documented. For example, a company has a BGV policy also, and they have all the documentation as well. But out of the 10 people who have joined the organization in the last 2 months, only two BGVs have done. Then what is the purpose? That means this control is not working properly. That means this control is only documented, but is not embedded into the operational side. Okay, so these are the real challenges, and this happens. Let me tell you very clearly that this happens in the organization. That is why we always say that you go for periodic internal audit and periodic risk assessment, so that at a continuous interval you should check whether these controls are working or not. Otherwise, how would you get to know? There is no other way, right? So this is how a person who is answering this in the interview should also answer this, starting with the process rather than directly starting with the control itself. Okay, that will give a mature response to somebody who is looking for a responsible role like an information security analyst or an information security manager, because this will show your mature level of understanding towards how controls are working. If you only answer in a layman language, that's why people say that we are not getting the calls. Okay, that's where the real problem is. Yeah, Aditi.
I think
Yes.
that is where SOA comes into the picture, wherein we can track all the controls that has been implemented in the organization. Yesterday we were speaking about SOA, statement of applicability, right? I think adding to this, we can add that also. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir. That's a great beginning, I guess. Okay. So moving on for the next question. Many organizations enable logging but fail in log review and correlation. How do you design a monitoring framework that makes login control truly effective?
Well, yeah, this question makes you to think. This is altogether a nest of the controls here. See, one and foremost important thing what we have to assess here is enabling the logging procedure. That is a control number one. Out of this, the next part of is like monitoring that control, how effective it is. That is crucial again. Or else just enabling or implementing the control will not be of much effective or useful, right? So, as a candidate, these questions check if the candidates know that logging alone is not enough. Someone must actually watch that logs, right? They have to watch it, they have to review it. A candidate should think about who reviews the logs, what they look for, and when they act on that particular logs, right? See, basically, login works only when alerts and responsibilities are clear. If we have a login procedure enabled and there is no alert out of that particular logging when there is any suspicious activity, and when we have a alert enabled and there is nobody to take care of that alerts, basically the responsible team or a person, then it's of no use of implementing all alone the control of enabling the logins, right? So I
Yeah.
can take up one more simple example. If someone's try to log in with the wrong password many times into the system, right? There should be an alert during that process, right? When there is an alert, the respective IT team should be able to act on that alert. See, now we see altogether implementing the control, right? Monitoring the control, and again, somebody who is responsible who has to work on the alerts that it has been generated, right? So that is how we have to monitor the controls effectively. Implementing is one part, and monitoring, that is a second control altogether, right? Yes, love, over to you.
Yeah, very good part, Jayant, you covered, and that is absolutely right how we should do it. The only thing I would like to add is, first of all, you need to start with what exactly are we trying to detect here? Like, what exactly are we trying to monitor? Are we trying to monitor a privilege escalation? Are we trying to monitor a brute force attack? Are we trying to monitor a data exfiltration? Like, what exactly are we trying to monitor here? That should be the approach that we should start basically for having a proper monitoring in place, first of all. Okay, so what exactly are we trying to detect? Based upon the scenarios, based upon the risk cases that you have, risk use cases, accordingly, first of all, you should decide. See, you can't monitor everything. Let me be very clear. You don't have that much bandwidth also, you don't have that much storage also, you don't have that much capacity also. So that is where, first of all, defining a use case as to what exactly needs to be logged in has to be understood first. And again, based on what parameters, what are your deciding factors? Okay, how are you deciding that? Are you trying to stop data exfiltration? Are you trying to stop ransomware attack? What exactly is your thought now? Keeping that in mind, now decide what kind of logging do you want, and then you jump on whatever things Jayant has mentioned, that having a proper accountability in place, having a proper framework is very important after that. Okay, but start
Yeah.
with having a risk mindset first. Like, why exactly should I need to monitor this? What is the trigger here? Okay, this is how you need to answer the interview. Okay, don't start with
Yeah.
SIEM does the monitoring and we do the correlation in SIEM. This everybody knows, guys. Don't say all that in the interview. Everybody knows how SIEM works. This question is not about SIEM, it's about your thought process, how you are thinking towards logging. That is what the interviewer wants to know here. Because Jayant, whenever people see logging, they think SIEM immediately triggers.
True, true, true. Yes.
So
See, the
now we
mindset
need to
is so that
understand.
once we enable
Yeah,
the logging, yes, we are done with the job. No, that will not stop at that position. It has to be reviewed, monitored, and reviewed very frequently. Again, we need to have a
exactly,
policy for that. Even that
exactly.
policy has to be governed again,
Yes,
right?
yes. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, before continuing the next question, I can see a lot of people who are seeing our podcast. So feel free to drop your question in the comment sections. We are making this for you only. Okay. ISO 27002 requires segregation of duties. In a small or mid sized organization with limited staff, how do you practically implement segregation of duties without disrupting operations?
Yeah, this is one of the good question again. See, when we talk about a controls, we always think most of our learners they think control is all about a technical part, right? This is one
Yeah.
such example. Even segregation of the duty itself is in a control here, right? That is what we talk about implementing security in all the verticals in the organization, like people, process, and technology. As a GRC analyst or a GRC consultant, we have to implement the security in all the verticals, end to end in the organization. So, coming back to answer this question now, this particular question checks if the candidate can apply segregation of duties practically when team is small, right? See, since your question is pointing on the small size when team is very small, like how it will be segregation, right? Basically, the idea is to avoid one person having a full control without oversight. So when I say oversight, there should be a four-eye check. There should be a person who checks the activity done by admin. Example, if we have any admin making changes, like someone else should be able to review that change also, what has admin has done. We all know that definitely being admin, he has a rights to make a necessary changes, but that shouldn't stop at that point. Somebody else should be there who can monitor and review the changes that has been carried out by admin, right? Maybe it's his manager or a IT head, right? Again, a simple example, like as I told you, IT admin can give access to systems, but those access should be given only after it has been approved by candidate manager. And again, that approval should come on the email or it should be there on the ticket, right? See, all this monitoring itself is in a control here, apart from segregation of the duties, right? Thank you for that good question,
Yes, sir.
Aditi.
Yes. Anything?
So yeah,
So,
so
yeah.
just basically to add on that, first of all, I would say why we need segregation of duties should be the thought process here. Why exactly you need SOD first? Okay, because there are some high risk areas, very simple, okay, which you do not want one person to handle. Okay, that is the basic premise for having a segregation of duties in place. For example, when you have a purchase order or any sort of approval process, a single person should not be able to create the purchase order also and should not be able to approve the same purchase order at the same time. This is where you need separation of duties, segregation of duties, right? So that one person can't do multiple tasks at the same time because it's a high risk area. Okay. Similarly,
Yeah.
any sort of payment related thing, like for example, approving an invoice and creating an invoice. Again, this should not be handled by a single person. Okay, because if you are creating an invoice, you should not be able to approve the same invoice. If you are able to do that, that means you can do anything because then you are the boss, right? Then to at the end of the day, whatever invoice you want, you can pass, right? So these are high risk areas where companies can see losses. Okay, that is where now we implement concepts like segregation of duties, maker checker concept, role based access controls. All these things now come into play. Okay, but you need to first of all start thinking about what are these critical risks and why they need the governance. That is more important. What kind of risk are these? Is it one super administrator who has the access to all the servers? This again is a very big issue because tomorrow if this person is not present, how will you manage these servers? And I have seen many organizations who are dependent upon one person only, who is managing the entire data center. Forget about servers. What, just think, because we are human beings, anything can happen, right? So we have to be conscious about these things. Never leave your entire data center, never leave all these things to one person. That is where segregation of duties is very important. Because see,
Yes.
people can play around with a lot of things which you don't even understand, right? That is where segregation of duties is important. If you give a complete right to one person, definitely you are there to maybe just waiting for something to happen, I would say that, right? Never do that. Wherever there is a high risk critical area, like managing a data center or managing different type of financial transactions, you need to have segregation of duties in place. You need to have dual controls in place. You need to have role based access controls in place. Those are very important. Okay, because these are some areas where you can't have one person. It's not possible. And if you have it, again I am saying you are waiting for a big disaster to happen, because that will happen. You can't avoid these scenarios. That is why these controls are designed. Otherwise, if nothing would have happened, then why we would have such a controls, right? These controls exist for a reason.
Hmm.
Okay.
That's true,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how do you determine whether a control is proportionate to organization's risk profile rather than blindly implementing all 93 controls equally?
This is the most important question which anybody would ask you in the interview. Very good, Aditi. This is, if
Yeah.
anybody is watching this podcast right now and you note down this question, trust me, if you have clarity on only this question, your entire interview process will be clear. because only somebody who has complete foundational understanding about the concept of risk, concept of risk appetite, concept of risk tolerance, concept of risk capacity, only that person will be able to answer now this question. Very good question, Riti. Go ahead, Jan.
Well, again, as a implementers, we have to justify to the business heads also, business people, right? We can't blindly say that we are here to implement all the controls, because each and every controls comes with the budget. It incurs a investment. So as a implementer, you should be clear on the controls, how to implement the controls, how each controls works actually. See, this is what you have to learn during your learning phase, during your training phase. You have to understand all the controls. When we talk about ISO 27002, it talks about 93 controls, wherein ISO 270 talks about the clauses, right? Again, to answering this question checks if the candidate understand the risk-based security here. So it's not about just thinking of the security. It should be risk-based security is what we are majorly focusing on, right? And not just applying every control equally. The candidate should think about which systems or data are most critical to the organization, right? Control should be stronger when there is a high risk systems. See, let us compare between the systems which are in live production and which are in lab, basically without having a live data in the lab basically. So we can have a multi-factor authentication for the system or the server which is in live, which has a critical data in it. So whereas for the other system which is in the lab without having not having a real data, critical data, no point of applying the multi-factor authentication, because all this controls, as I told you, it comes with the investment budget. So as a implementer, as a candidate, we should be clear which controls to apply, when to apply, where to apply, right? Yes,
Yes.
Aditi.
So yeah, very well said, Jan. So basically, what I would add to that is start with the assets. Okay, what all assets do you have? Start with the proper risk assessment. Okay, once you identify the risk, okay, then you come to the control side after identification of the risk. Then you decide, if I put a control on this risk, what type of control do I need to put? Do I need to put a preventive control? Do I need to put a detective control? Or do I need to put a corrective control, right? And what is the impact if I put the control? Okay, so will this reduce the risk, and how much is the cost of implementation of this control? Okay, for example, if the risk is low, you implement light controls. But if the risk is very high, then you have to implement layered set of controls, right? Then one control will not work. Okay, so that is where, based upon the risk, now you have to decide the control implementation. And one very important document in this particular aspect is statement of applicability. This document will help you think which controls do you want to implement, why do you want to implement, because here you have to justify the inclusion and exclusion of each and every control. That is where SOA comes very handy. Okay, so SOA is basically not a single tick 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 checklist. It's not a checklist. It's basically a risk based decision approach document. That is why I said somebody has to be very clear on the risk assessment and risk statement. Only then they can answer that question. Okay, so your SOA
Yes.
document will be very helpful in that manner. Okay, that is how you basically then think what all controls you have to implement, whether you have to implement 93 controls or not. Sometimes I have seen organizations implementing more than 93 controls also. Sometimes we have seen organizations implementing less than 93 also. So all this depends upon what? The risk level of the organization, what all assets do they have, what is the risk appetite of the organization, how much budgets do they have, because you know that every control involves a cost, right? And if the management is ready to spend that much amount or not, again depending upon the risk appetite. So that is where all these questions now are relating to. Okay, and if you answer in this way to the interviewer, definitely they will understand that you have a foundational understanding about how these things are working in the organization, and that is what they are looking for. See, answering a question anybody can answer. Let me be very clear. Okay. Now, your answer should be mature enough to get you the job. That is why you are there. Okay. Answer तो कोई भी दे देगा. Let me be very clear. Answer देना is not a problem here. Giving the right answer so that the interviewer assesses your maturity of the information security. That is where you have to understand. Okay. And
Yeah.
that is why these podcasts we are bringing to you every day, so that you have that mature mindset, so that you can answer these questions. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So before moving on, there is one question. What if regulatory has mandatory control implementation? Do we consider cost for implementing? This is a question from MySiri143 from YouTube.
Then
Well, see, now the question here is regulatory mandatory controls. When we talk about regulatory, yes, it has to be implemented. And the second part is, do we consider cost for implementing? Yeah, definitely we consider the cost. But again, this has to be discussed as a GRC consultant. You should know how to implement this control. What is the objective of this control? And you have to able to justify to the management, right? See, when we talk about access control, we have a different access controls, right? We can have a biometric, we can have a PK card, different types of which one you select as a consultant and which one you justify to the organization, right? See, definitely because it's a mandatory regulatory, we have to. But again, you have a different option. That is what it makes important for you to know all the different controls available, right? We have a 93 control. We can have more controls also, wherein we call it as a control mapping altogether. Yes, Law, you want to add more? Yeah.
see, whenever regulatory, yeah, Aditi, yes. So whenever regulatory wants you to implement certain control, basically you need to first of all understand what is the current state of the organization. You need to do a gap assessment first of all. Okay, like what is the current state versus the mandated requirement. You have to understand that first, because most of the times I have seen whenever regulatory has mandated a control, 60-70% of the companies already have it, Jan. It's nothing new, like, because regulatory will never ask you to do something which is out of the box. They will always ask you to do something which is a bare minimum requirement, right? So definitely that always is there. Otherwise, if it is not there, you identify what are the gaps and whether there are operational gaps or there are actually control design gaps. That means the controls are actually not there. That you have to now understand. And now depending upon that and depending upon your, again, organization risk appetite and all those factors considering, then you implement, like Jen mentioned, out of the 93, if the risk is very high, you implement a layered approach. Otherwise, if the risk is very low, you implement only lighter controls. That's how you would go about it. But you would start with gap assessment. You would start with the current state versus the state that the regulatory now wants you to be at, because that should be your end goal, right, for the implementation. That is the thought process I would give here. And this is a very good question, by the way. If somebody has put this question, they are basically having a good knowledge about GRC, I would say that. Good question.
See, Love,
Yeah.
again, adding to this point, can we say because we have a regulatory body known as certain, right? Every country has a certain. In India, we have cert in actually certain basically, wherein there is a regulation. Every organization should have a backup for about 180 days, right? But that is a regulatory control. But again, as a GRC consultant, we should know what type of backup we should have it, how to have it, where to have it, what will be the incurring cost for that. Example, we can have a on-prem backup or we can have a backup on the cloud. Everything comes with the cost. That is when our maturity, our knowledge on the domain comes into the play, right? We should be able to suggest to the business owners, to the management, which one will be more effective, which one will be cost effective. So these are all the different aspects we have to see when we think of all these questions. Definitely, it's a good question. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Maishri, for asking this question. So before I end this discussion, I just like to add something. Like controls don't fail because the standard is weak; they fail because execution is weak. If you think beyond documentation and talk about practical challenges, you are already ahead of most professionals. So yeah, this is the basic main difference in this. And Love sir and Jen sir, if you want to add something in the end, you can.
Yeah,
Question.
Aditi, thank you. Definitely. See, as we mentioned in the previous podcast today, also we're mentioning all this thing 93 controls we are talking about ISO 27001, 27002. These hold as a fundamental for anybody who wants to establish in GRC domain, right? Before even getting into other certifications or gaining the other knowledge, I humble a request from my end to go through these two, even if it is not for the sake of certification, for the sake of learning, to make sure you have a right fundamentals before you upscale yourself in the different position in the organization. Once you are good in these two subject, basically you will be able to command on your work basically, right? So thank you.
Okay, so one question again from my issue is, what are the touch points to create a unified governance across multiple standards?
Go ahead, love, you can take it up. Sure.
Okay, okay. Again, very mature question, Siri, and thank you so much for asking such questions. This shows your level of maturity towards the GRC processes. Keep on asking these questions. These are the questions which will actually benefit the viewers. Actually, Aditi, this is what we want, because these
Yeah.
questions are somebody's concerns, or these questions have been asked by somebody in the interview already. That is why they are coming to us for answers. So this is why we are doing this podcast, by the way. Let me be very clear. We are not doing this podcast for our questions. We are doing this podcast for your questions. So definitely feel free. Keep on adding those questions. We are here for you. Let them come. We will stretch for another half an hour, but let them come. Okay. So definitely. So thank you so much. It's a great question. So how unified governance you have to deploy across different standards? So first of all, you need to understand what all are you talking about in terms of governance. Are you talking about information security? Are you talking about privacy? Are you talking about AI governance? Let us consolidate now all, because you are saying unified governance. So all these are different platforms. Let's say for one moment, having a consolidated single approach, like a consolidated risk register, and a single risk register having all the risk related to security, related to privacy, related to AI, related to business continuity, related to compliance, related to regulatory, would be the starting point for me. This is how I would do it. Because a single risk register having all these consolidated risks would actually help you to then govern them accordingly. That should be the starting point. Okay, you have to start with a single consolidated risk register, because if you don't have a consolidated risk register, you cannot have a unified governance. Forget about it. When you talk about unified governance, you need a single consolidated risk register. That is where you need to now start from. Okay, then accordingly, once you have all the risk identified, then accordingly you establish the control implementation, you create the policies, procedures, you basically, you try to map them with the related risks which are there. So this is how it would start actually. Starting point would be to collate all the type of risks at one place, so that then you can go for a unified, governance approach. And this is a very good idea, by the way, because Jen, this is a very good idea. Then this is how implementers work on the reality as well. What we do, we will map everything at one place, so that what the beauty of this is that if you are going for a data governance, at the same point you are talking about data security also, you're talking about privacy also, you're talking about AI
Yeah, yeah,
also, because
right.
everything is dependent upon data now, right? So when you do a unified governance approach, that will help you to now sort it out actually at a very deep level. And also you don't have to do a repeated site of a recursive exercise for each and every control. Are you getting me? So that is where
Yes.
by a single shot you will be able to mitigate a lot of risk at the same time. So it's a very very good approach. This is the approach that we follow in the actual implementation also. Let me be very clear what he or she is pointing out here. So this is what we do.
So this point can be implemented where organization have implemented multiple governance altogether. When we talk about privacy, ISO 27001, ISO 42001, ISO 277001, right? That is when we can have a unified governance altogether, right?
And we would see that now everywhere, Jan, because now you see DPDP has come, privacy has come now, data security was already there, right? So now two governances you already have, and third governance for AI, I think will almost be there by the end of this year. You know that because AI laws have already started coming. We saw that, right? From 20th
Yeah.
of Feb, they have already started. So
Yes.
now
Yes.
this year is the year of AI. I would say you'll see more and more AI governance now coming up. So then definitely company would need this kind of approach. Yes,
See, even I would like to add even vendor governance also here, right?
definitely.
We
Yes,
have it is almost integral part of all this,
yes,
all the
yes,
three
yes.
verticals we are talking about.
Yeah.
Yes,
See, RBI mandates it, SEBI mandates it. All the major governances are mandating about it. So third party risk management definitely is there. Yes.
right, right. Thank you, Srinath. Thank you for that very valuable questions.
Thank you, Srinath. Anything, Lavsa, you want to add for the wrapping up session?
Oh, Shushi Srinath, huh?
Yeah, Srinath
Okay,
here,
okay,
like old student.
okay. Thank you so much for asking these questions, Srinath, and keep on asking. These are good questions.
Okay, so let's end this discussion here. So this was today's Gupshup. See you in the next one with sharper questions and deeper conversations.
So
Till then, bye
tomorrow
bye.
again we'll be back. Yeah, that's what she's saying. Tomorrow again we'll be back, same time, and
Yeah,
tomorrow will be the last session. And from Monday, I shall I tell them, Aditi, or you want to tell them
yeah,
tomorrow?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so from Monday, you guys are going to be very lucky because from Monday, two types of podcasts will be coming from CyberGRC. One will be the same routine podcast that you have every day from 9 a.m. in the morning till 9:30 or 10. But the next podcast, which is coming now every day, starting Monday, will be something that Aditi would like to talk about. Go ahead, Aditi. What is the plan from Monday?
So we plan to go live every evening around 5:30 to 6, like chai pe charcha thing, and
Wow,
we'll
that's great.
talk. We'll discuss what are the challenges, what are the most generic questions, what are the most confusing question that you don't know about the GRC. We'll talk there, and we can have the most relevant conversation there. So see you on Monday at 5:30 to 6.
Yeah, so see, now you have two options to interact with Aditi. One in the morning, one in the evening. So feel free now. So platform is open for you for two times a day now.
Yeah, it's like a chai pe charcha thing.
And everybody is welcome on that chai pe charcha. Like we can be very clear on that, right?
Yeah.
So one
Anybody
is
can join
Gupshup
that
with
session.
breakfast and one is chai charcha, right?
In the evening. It's a late evening tea sort
Right,
of thing.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. And just to inform everybody, we have got a great engagement in few projects related to privacy, right, Jen? And we
Very
we
much.
are
Yes.
we are in the process of implementation of these privacy related projects, and more you will see from us coming on the same lines as and when we approach the implementation more and more. And definitely we'll tell you what are the challenges, what are the pitfalls, everything we'll discuss. But with your blessings, with your support, now we have landed a good number of projects in privacy recently. And thank you so much everybody who has been supporting us for long. And yeah, Jayant, you want to add on that?
Well, thank you. Definitely, as you mentioned, Love, let us think of getting some challenges, whatever the key takeaway that we have it out of those projects. We will start discussing on this podcast so that even all our viewers should be able to get out of it, right? They should
Yes,
get some
yes,
value.
Yes.
What actually happens during the live implementation? What are the
yes,
challenges we come across? How to
yes,
crack it? What is the
yes,
learning out of it? We will take
yes.
up. We will come up with all those things definitely, right? Great.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for your time also. And thank you so much, viewers, for viewing this podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.